10 in a way. It's like double digits of a Pokemon game. You never would normally get to see this, and I simply can't wait. So I think, Lee, we should jump right into another game 1 in this best of 5 set. And remember, the winner of this best of 5 will be your champion of the Pokemon Players Cup 3. This is it. Leonardo is going to be bringing out a Venusaur and Venusaur and Charizard coming out there, and Venusaur and Incineroar on Jonathan's side. 2 Venusaurs, very confusing.
Yeah, and it's a nice adjustment here from Leonardo because it gives you a lot of flexibility, this lead, because you've got the option to switch out Charizard, get the Groudon onto the field, or switch the Venusaur out and get the Groudon out on that side, and then take advantage of either of these Pokemon, the Charizard, which gets its Solar Power, or the Venusaur, which gets its Chlorophyll ability. Jonathan going with a nice steady lead as well, with the Venusaur going to be able to potentially go for Max Guard like we've seen him do, just stall out those Gigantamax turns from the opposite side of the field. And the Incineroar, a big player here because that parting shot has been so invaluable to him. But this is something that Leonardo is aware of, so he has to be very careful with allowing that parting shot to go off, because it does slow him down and it prevents him from really building the momentum that he's going to need to kind of carry him through this match.
Yeah, I like this here from Jonathan. Going back to plan A, that, you know, got him those wins earlier on in those previous best of 5s. The Venusaur and the Incineroar being able to apply pressure with the fake out and that parting shot critically. Not going to be bringing that Tornadus and Kyogre lead quite yet, but we obviously see the Dynamax come out here from Jonathan, and if it's going to be that Venusaur, I really like the situation here because you can apply a lot of pressure down onto that opposing Groudon that has just switched in. If you're maybe able to catch it with the Vine Lash, particularly as Groudon's now on the field, the sun is in the sky, the Chlorophyll ability is going to be activated, but you have to be careful because then Solar Power will be activated on that Charizard as well.
Yeah, and that's the big problem. If you attack into the Groudon here, yes, you may be able to get rid of it and you start your residual damage, but at what cost? You're going to lose your Venusaur to the Charizard because it's kind of sitting open now for Leonardo to really take advantage of his Charizard. The sun is up, and he's going to be able to remove one thing that really does, you know, take advantage of the sun that Jonathan's got available to him.
Yeah, well, Incineroar's going to go for the fake out here down into what was previously the Venusaur, instead going into the Groudon and, you know, obviously trying to break the Focus Sash that was on the Venusaur in that slot. Damage is going to come down though, however, into that opposing Groudon. It's going to be able to just, you know, eat its berry a little bit. Of course, the double target down, really trying to pick up the KO against the Groudon on Leonardo's side, but to no avail as it is now a Groudon. Charizard going to be able to capitalise on this and go for the max airstream. Huge damage going down into that Incineroar. You can really see when it doesn't have its special attack, reduce the offensive pressure that it can deal out.
Yeah, the Solar Power just elevates Groudon, Charizard to another level, especially when you combine it with that Life Orb item that the Charizard's holding for Leonardo, and given the speed boosters, which was really important for him here, because then it puts you in a better position, especially going into the next turn. If you do see something like the Tornadus come onto the field for Jonathan, then you've got the freedom to go for another Airstream. Even though you know about the Cobra Berry on the Venusaur, you can opt to go for that. You can opt to go for a G-Max Blast Burn into the Tornadus if you see it come onto the field. Or if you're Jonathan as well, you may want to go down a route where you get Kyogre onto the field, but then you're kind of stuck a bit because you don't want to be really switching Kyogre out into Tornadus, which you're going to probably have to do if you want to kind of dictate the weather going forward in this match. So Tornadus feels like maybe the better option here, but Jonathan going with that Kyogre just to get rid of that Sun Boost this initial turn for the Charizard.
I mean, you're right, Lee. It was certainly a difficult decision which Pokemon do you want to bring into this situation. You could see Jonathan really running down the clock a little bit there in those last couple of seconds, but has opted to go for that Kyogre, just change the weather over. And of course, with Charizard being Gigantamax, it can't reset the weather with any of those Fire-type moves. It's not going to be able to use a Max Flare, for example. And if Leonardo wants to get the weather back on his side, he's going to have to switch the Groudon out and back in.
Yeah, and you know, the one thing that Kyogre does provide is a little bit more protection for that Venusaur and allows Jonathan to really utilize maybe the G-Max Vine Lash, which we see him getting here, and it allows him to potentially get the residual damage started on Leonardo's side of the field, which is invaluable, you know. Is the Kyogre going to be able to take a double up from the Charizard and the Groudon? You've got to keep in mind that if the Charizard goes for another Airstream here into the Kyogre, then the Groudon's 100% going to be able to get Precipice Blades off, but Leonardo want to preserve that and the weather for later on in this game.
Yeah, Venusaur is going to join the field here for Leonardo, just switching out the Groudon so it can come back in later, and Charizard going to max guard, so it's going to be protected until Groudon is able to help it out on the field a little bit later on. We are going to see, however, the Water Spout come out, targeting down, going to connect down into that opposing Venusaur, do a decent chunk of damage, as the Vine Lash does come out as well, and Venusaur going to be able to take that much better than the opposing Groudon would, but I think the critical thing here is just getting that residual damage as well on the field.
Yeah, and now, you know, Charizard on Leonardo's side, he's almost forced to go for the G-Max Wildfire here to start that residual damage if he values it, but at the same time, you're getting your Groudon onto the field, and do you go for the G-Max Wildfire into the Kyogre just to reduce the power of potentially a Water Spout? Because we've seen it time and time again where the Groudon switches in on the Kyogre at full health, and it takes so much damage, and you're not only switching in front of a Kyogre now, you're switching in alongside a Venusaur that's probably going to be able to take it'll take an Airstream, but it probably won't be able to take a Sun boosted Blast Burn. But it's so easy here for Jonathan just to go for this max guard this turn and maybe click the Water Spout or Origin Pulse button.
Yeah, that's very true, and Groudon going to rejoin the field though to try and reduce the damage from those water type attacks, but Jonathan not going to be letting Kyogre operate in the sun. It's going to be returning to its Pokeball, and Tornadus is going to join the field here. Venusaur going to be able to go for that max use and of course boost up the Tornadus and the Venusaur by +1 on the special attack side at the end of this turn, but whether or not the Charizard's got something to say about it in the sun, it might be able to pick up a cheeky KO against either one of Jonathan's Pokemon here. It all depends who the Charizard has decided to target. With this powerful max Airstream, it's going to target down into that Tornadus and pick up a solid KO, so Jonathan doesn't have the option to utilize anything such as Tailwind in this game.
No Tailwind now, which is really plays more into Leonardo's side. You know, he preferably doesn't want to have to contend with that, and getting rid of the Tornadus there, he kind of sacrifices the fact that he's not really got his G-Max Blast Burn onto the field, but at the same time, taking away Tailwind, which is the one thing that Jonathan relies on quite heavily to try and close these matches out and support his Kyogre. It's a really valuable thing to get out of this turn, and the Charizard you've got to remember now is still +2, so it's going to be able to outspeed the Venusaur this next turn and still put a lot of pressure onto it, even with the rain up. But you probably want to protect your Charizard this next turn, get your Groudon off the field, maybe bring Venusaur back in, sacrifice that, get your Groudon back out onto the field, and you know, once you've got that weather control, it becomes a lot easier for Leonardo, and we still haven't seen the 4th Pokemon that Leonardo's brought to this set yet.
Yeah, I really wouldn't be surprised to see Leonardo do the same strategy we just saw him do to reset the weather. Protect Charizard, switch out Groudon, maybe sacrifice something, but bringing the Groudon back into Charizard can utilize the sun with the solar power. The fact that it's got those Airstream boosts as well, as long as Charizard's on the field, it's going to be able to keep that in play. And Leonardo just retracting the Groudon in place of that Venusaur once again. And you know, Venusaur, it can take a few attacks from the opposing Venusaur, and Charizard quite wisely protecting. So I really like this methodical play coming out here from Leonardo. He knows exactly what he wants to be able to do here. Kyogre is going to go for the Origin Pulse, is going to be able to find its mark in the rain onto that opposing Venusaur here, but of course even if you're able to pick up the KO on that Venusaur, which the Kyogre has been able to do, it only gives Leonardo the very free switch back into Groudon at the beginning of the next turn, and Venusaur just going for a Sludge Bomb to no avail here.
Yeah, and now the Venusaur on Jonathan's side of the field in a little bit of an awkward spot. You know, you're going to be able to get your Groudon onto the field if you are Leonardo, which disrupts the weather. Of course, it puts it into your favor. It means the Venusaur is going to be a bit more pressure going into this turn. But again, the Kyogre's not in a terrible spot here because it can just click that Origin Pulse button, and with how low the Charizard is and the Groudon on Leonardo's side of the field, they're likely, even in the sun, to go down to 1 Origin Pulse hitting here for Jonathan.
Yeah, if the Origin Pulse is able to connect, that's always the risk that I dread when I click that button myself. And Groudon here just going to go straight up for the Protect, as Charizard does go for the Heat Wave here, does manage to connect on both Pokemon, of course, picks up a solid KO against the Venusaur, super effective in Sun, Life Orb, Solar Power. You can just keep listing them off, it's going to deal huge damage, but Kyogre very happy to be able to take that and can retaliate with that Water Spout. Of course, not connecting onto the Groudon, but Charizard with the really low HP that it's at, is not going to be able to survive that at all, even in the sun.
No, but I think what Leonardo's done here is really nice, because if the final Pokemon that he's got access to is that Regieleki, we know it can come in, and it's going to be able to make quick work of that Kyogre now without Tailwind support as well, and there's Sun just boosting it even further. So Leonardo really utilizing the Charizard and the Venusaur combination here extremely well in this first game.
Yeah, Regieleki, definitely the Pokemon that Jonathan doesn't want to see, and you can see he's locked in the forfeit very quickly there, knowing there isn't a way out for Kyogre here. So Leonardo is going to be able to take game 1 in this final best of 5. And the one thing I love to see is the way that Leonardo is able to play so well with just 3 Pokemon. Having the Groudon there and the Charizard and the Venusaur, and just saving that Regieleki in the back. And it's got to be a constant threat for Jonathan, knowing that he's brought it quite often and it hides in the back. And if you don't get yourself into an end game state that's favourable for you, if you're Jonathan, then Regioleki's just going to be able to come in and pick up KOs. You see how much damage it's capable of dealing out.
Yeah, and even to resisted Pokemon, it's still doing so much damage with that magnet, boosting its special attack and its electric type attacks. Yeah, so that's I think one thing that Jonathan needs to try and keep in mind for the late game is maybe trying to preserve the Venusaur better than what he's doing. He's leading it most games, but if you keep that back for an endgame situation, Venusaur is probably one of the better things that he's got access to that can come in and really give Regieleki a bit more of a harder time with things like Earth Power, even with the Weather Ball if the Sun or the Rain are on the field. But you really need to be utilising the Tailwind, which he wasn't able to do there. Leonardo making a great play and a decision to get rid of the Tornadus at a time where, he didn't have to. He could have targeted into the Venusaur, but decided, let's get rid of the speed control. Once that's gone, my options really get a lot better, and that Regieleki has a lot more freedom, especially in an endgame situation where it can come in and these Pokemon are chipped down and there isn't that speed control support where it's just got the freedom to kind of just close the game out for him.
Yeah, I guess that is one of the difficulties for Jonathan, because unfortunately his Venusaur isn't the one running Earth Power, it's the one on Leonardo's side of the field. So if you're Jonathan, you don't have that option there, and of course being able to boost up your special defense, really nice in the face of a Regieleki as well. But I mean, we've seen it so many times for Regieleki. As much as I love it, it does not have the best defensive capability. So even something like the G-Max Vine Lash, like you mentioned, Lee, going into that slot not only will be able to very likely pick up the KO, big damage, but then set up that residual damage that we've seen be so critical. Potentially if you are just starting to chip away at Pokemon like the Umbreon that we know have been so difficult for Jonathan to deal with, if you can just stop it, kind of being able to survive out a turn and go for a Moonlight, then you get rid of that threat very quickly.
Yeah, and it's it's dealing with the Charizard now for Jonathan. It becomes the issue because now it is difficult because you leading with the Tornadus Kyogre again, you would think it probably gives you a bit more flexibility. It allows you to keep things like Incineroar in the back that can come in, be a bit more disruptive, be a bit more supportive for you in times where you need to just create that bit of room. So that could be a way for him to approach that. But the Venusaur Charizard lead makes it extremely difficult because then what do? Do you go for the Dynamax with your Tornadus again, target into the Venusaur? And that's not a bad play, but then if the Groudon comes in and the Charizard maxes, a big G-Max Wildfire is going to do disastrous damage to the Tornadus, even if it's in its max form. So the options there are very difficult, and I think that's why Leonardo's kind of splitting decision, making it very difficult for Jonathan to make a decision on what he wants to go with, and it really comes back to how well he adapts to that lead coming into this next game.
Yeah, it's a really awkward 50-50 for our players there, depending on what Pokemon they're facing down. So let's jump into game 2. Remember, Leonardo is 1 game up here in our final best of 5. But Jonathan, we've seen make adaptations in the past to be able to make a strong comeback. So let's see what happens. Leonardo leading up once again with that Venusaur and Charizard lead, and Jonathan making the adjustment for that Kyogre and Tornadus.
Yeah, so I mean, it's better than the previous game for Jonathan here because you do have options like we've just talked about where you can go for the max with the Tornadus here, or you can potentially just go for a Tailwind and just click the Water Spout button, or you can even go for the Dynamax with the Kyogre. The problem is, though, of course, if that Venusaur is the Pokemon that stays on the field and you don't attack into it, and then the Groudon makes an appearance like we are seeing here for Leonardo.
Yeah, let's see what's happening here. Leonardo does bring in the Groudon. Venusaur's going to be very happy about this. And of course, we've got to remember that Venusaur on Leonardo's side does have the Focus Sash. No Dynamax, however, in turn 1. That's an adaptation from our players so far. We do see the Tailwind, and we also see this Sleep Powder. So maybe going back to basics a little bit here. In the Winners Finals game, we saw a lot of sleep going around, and we haven't seen too much so far. But Venusaur changing it up, connecting on that Tornadus as the Water Spout does come off. Huge damage to that opposing Groudon and critically breaking the Focus Sash on that opposing Venusaur. But I think really nice from Leonardo here to be able to just shut down that Tornadus.
Yeah, that's a really nice option there from him to just make sure that it's not a threat going forward now. You know, if you're going to go for the tailwind, I'm going to put you to sleep. It is a little bit risky because it obviously can miss, but it pays off like it has done. It really gives you a lot more flexibility going into this turn because, yes, you can, if you're Jonathan, go for the Dynamax on the Kyogre, but at the same time, it's so easy now for Leonardo to not be pressured by the Tornadus like you maybe were the previous turn and just go for the Gigantamax yourself and get some big damage onto the Kyogre in return.
Yeah, I mean, the Tornadus is guaranteed to take 1 turn of sleep here. So Jonathan is going to be stuck with it here on the field. The Kyogre is going to switch out, though, in place for the Incineroar, and I like this. You could throw the Intimidate down onto the opposing Groudon, and of course, Incineroar is not going to be able to be put to sleep by that opposing Venusaur thanks to the Safety Goggles item. Groudon, however, is going to get out of the way as well for Leonardo, as Charizard's going to join the field. So Leonardo's got himself in a nice position where both his Pokemon that benefit from the sun being in the sky are on the field. Tornadus is going to take that first turn of sleep as Venusaur goes for the Weather Ball. So going to be firing down this fire attack into the opposing Tornadus. Does about over 50% there, and Charizard just going to take its chip from Solar Power from just being here on the field.
Yeah, but a great turn here for Leonardo, really concentrating down onto the Tornadus and making sure that, you know, if I've got the room to get rid of it, I am removing it from play because I don't want to have to contend with another Tailwind in this match. Like, you know, he shut that down so well in the previous game, so doing it in this one as well with the Sleep Powder and then the combination of attacks really opens things up for him to have a kind of similar end to this game like he did in game 1. And the problem is now you can always switch into the Kyogre, but it's really difficult switching it in, like we've said before, into the Venusaur, and it does weaken the Charizard, but do you really want to take that Airstream damage? So you're really trying to utilize the Incineroar now to get that parting shot, which you desperately need onto maybe something like the Charizard here.
Yeah, so many options there for that Incineroar. Does it go for Fake Out? Does it try and get a Flare Blitz in the sun? Maybe down onto that Venusaur with a Broken Focus Sash, try and pick up a cheeky KO. Or it can always go for that parting shot and reduce some of the special attack on the opposing side of the field. But we have yet to see what the Incineroar's gone for, as the Charizard does go for its Gigantamax. So Leonardo locking this in, wanting to be able to fire off maybe a powerful Max Airstream here, try and pick up a KO against that opposing Incineroar, and obviously get the speed boosted up on Leonardo's side as well. Tornadus still going to be taking a little bit of a nap here. I mean, it's worked hard throughout this grand final so far, as Incineroar does go for the Darkest Lariat. So not going to be being able to pick up a KO by any means, but could potentially put Charizard in range of a Water Spout a little bit later on. For its troubles though, Incineroar is going to be KO'd by that very powerful Max Airstream, and Regieleki already delighted to be here, but even happier with a speed boost.
Yeah, and that's so big for Leonardo now, you know, getting that speed boost onto the Regieleki kind of puts it out of the way of those Tailwinds on Jonathan's side of the field. So even if that Tornadus does wake up and manage to get through this next turn, which is very unlikely to do, just because of the threat that's now on the field for Leonardo, it's not going to worry too much when the Kyogre comes onto the field in the Tailwind, because it knows it's going to be able to outspeed it. So really nice play from Leonardo, making it very difficult for Jonathan to really utilize his Pokemon as he wants to in this game. And you know, you had to really leave the Incineroar out on the field there if you're Jonathan. You look at what he's got on the back. He's got the Venusaur and the Kyogre, so it's an easy target for Leonardo here to go for that Airstream into that slot, knowing, well, if the Kyogre comes in, yes, I lose my Solar Power, but I'm still going to get some really significant damage onto it, get the speed boost, which is going to benefit my Regieleki. And if the Venusaur comes in, yeah, well, the Cobra Berry will protect you so much, but not so much if you're not in that Gigantamax state.
Yep, that's very true. You need that HP boost that you get doubled when you go into your Gigantamax to really be able to start taking some of these powerful attacks that we know Charizard and Regieleki are capable of dealing out. Interesting state of affairs though, like the weather has now changed up. We've got the rain on the field, but Regieleki's still looking very strong in the face of both of these Pokemon that Regieleki loves to deal good damage to.
Yeah, and you know, now we are seeing Jonathan kind of hoping that we get the wake up now with the Tornadus, as he does go for the Dynamax into the Tornadus, going for the Airstream, because hoping the Tornadus is going to be able to outspeed in the Tailwind, which it should be able to get that Airstream boost onto the Kyogre. And then when you combine that with the Tailwind, it probably just puts it ahead of the Regieleki and the Charizard. In the rain, you're going to be able to potentially pick up a knockout, but it relies on the Tornadus waking up here, so it's a big gamble here from Jonathan.
Yeah, things do get intense. It is grand finals. These things are going to be coming right down to the wire. Not only does Tornadus have to wake up, but it then critically has to be able to get that KO as well. Otherwise, Jonathan is going to be in a really precarious situation going forward in the rest of this match. So let's see if Tornadus is going to be able to wake up in this particular match. Charizard going straight away for the max guard, however, so not going to be taking any damage this turn. Regieleki gets out of there with the Volt Switch and picks up the KO with a critical hit. Poor Jonathan there, you know, not only do we not get to see if it wakes up, but the Dynamax is gone before Jonathan's even able to utilize it.
Yeah, you know, just showing how incredibly useful that one max airstream from the Charizard was here, allowing Leonardo to preserve the Regieleki, keep it in the back, and then bring in potentially the Groudon if he wanted to, or the Venusaur that we know can soak up these big, powerful water spouts a lot better than anything else that he's got access to on his team.
Yep, Charizard not taking the water spout. Venusaur is, however, going to take it, does huge damage and picks up the KO.
Yeah.
So Venusaur is going to leave us, but, you know, Leonardo does have the utility in the back as well. You've got the Groudon to reset up that weather, and you've also got the Regieleki to apply that offensive pressure. And Jonathan doesn't have the luxury anymore, being down to the last 2 Pokemon, to be able to switch out that Kyogre and reset the weather.
No dictation here from him for the weather control. It's all on Leonardo's side of the field now. And losing the Tornadus like that, it means you've not got access any longer to your Dynamax. Really unfortunate turn for him here, getting punished like that with the Tornadus. The Regieleki just doing so much work here, and making it very difficult as we go into the final turn, where this Gigantamax Charizard is going to be able to have the pick of the targets on Jonathan's side of the field. You know, the Venusaur's an easy one. You know there's no Protect there, and you know it doesn't hurt going into the Kyogre either, but there's more likely a Protect coming out from that side. But you know, it's going to be very difficult for Jonathan to kind of claw this one back. Maybe Sleep Powder onto something like the Regieleki if you protect your Kyogre could help you here, but it's going to be very difficult to kind of pull back from this position that Leonardo set up for himself.
I mean, the speed could be interesting here. Venusaur will be speedy in Sun and goes for that Sleep Powder, going first into that Charizard and putting that big threat to sleep is really nice for Jonathan, particularly if this Kyogre is going for that powerful Water-type move, going for that Origin Pulse, finds his mark on both these Pokemon, and even then the Sun, able to get a KO on that opposing Groudon, putting that Charizard in such range of being KO'd on this next turn. And particularly as we've seen that this Venusaur is super speedy, the Sun is in the sky as well, Charizard's not going to hang around for long.
Yeah, now the tables completely flipped there for Jonathan with that. You know, getting the Charizard onto the field really benefited him there, because it meant that the Chlorophyll activated allowed him to actually outspeed the Charizard, that situation. And now, you know, it looks like Jonathan's going to be able to tie this one up now with the Regieleki coming out into the field. It hasn't got that speed boost anymore. Is Venusaur going to be able to get the Sleep Powder onto it? That's what you're kind of hoping for. Or do you expect the Regieleki to protect here? I don't know if the Regieleki is going to be able to pick up the knockout onto the Kyogre. I don't know if we've seen the calculation onto a full health Kyogre here, so there may be an option for, you know, Jonathan to go for a Sludge Bomb into the Charizard and just click the Origin Pulse. Or be a bit more pragmatic and just protect here while the Venusaur deals with the Charizard, which is an easy turn because the Charizard is more than likely going to take a turn of sleep. There is a possibility it does wake up though. Yeah,
I mean, Charizard goes down anyway thanks to its solar power at the end of this turn, but whether it can wake up in time to maybe deal some damage out, we'll have to see. Not going to be able to get a KO from Regieleki. It does go for the Electro Web on the Venusaur and the Kyogre though, maybe putting Charizard in range to wake up, but no, it does not. It is still sleeping, so will be KO'd at the end of this turn, and Venusaur free and safe to go for a Sludge Bomb straight into it. Doesn't want to risk anything like it waking up. Obviously it couldn't, the speeds had changed anyway, but just a nice play from Jonathan here. Unfortunately, Regieleki does dive out of the way of Kyogre's attack.
Yeah, and let's to see another turn here as we go into it. But you know, the Venusaur still in a great spot where it can just get nice consistent damage onto the Regieleki, and it's such a good health point as well. The Regieleki going to really struggle to knock it out, and you know, it can go for the Electro Webs, but probably not going to be enough to take both things out in one fell swoop.
Yeah, it goes into the Venusaur, and you can see Venusaur really being able to resist these electric type attacks coming out from the Regieleki. The Weather Ball is going to go and find its mark, not be quite enough to pick up a KO, but Kyogre this time finding its mark with that Origin Pulse and connecting onto the opposing Regieleki. So Jonathan able to take back a game here, and in its final best of 5, we are seeing 1 game apiece at the moment between Jonathan and Leonardo.
Yeah, really nice comeback there for Jonathan in a position where you kind of thought, oh, it doesn't look too good for you, and he, you know, takes full advantage of Leonardo bringing in the Groudon at probably the wrong time for him. Even though, you know, it was helping him deal with the Kyogre threat as well. But really, you know, that's the beauty about having Kyogre and the Venusaur. If the sun comes out, which is the automatic kind of disruption for the rain, then you take full advantage of that chlorophyll ability, and then got the jump onto the Charizard, managed to hit the sleep powder and shut the Charizard out of the game, which was so necessary for Leonardo at that point to kind of close things out.
Yeah, it's definitely swings and roundabouts with the weather, because it benefits one of your Pokemon like the Venusaur, but then, you know, Kyogre's not going to be very happy in the sun. But the fact that it can deal so much damage despite the weather conditions is phenomenal, and it's amazing that it really was the only Kyogre that we got to see in global finals. It's, you know, really making its mark and really justifying why it was an excellent choice for Jonathan to put on the team. But things still get so risky for Jonathan. You have to be able to connect that sleep powder and obviously hit your origin pulses as well. If things miss, then things could easily tilt the other way.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned already, though, in this set, you know, it's such fine margins, and it's that 1 or 2 turns in each set that really kind of swings it into either one or the other player's favor for coming out on top of it. And it's not been, you know, that dominant on one side to the other. Players are really adapting and changing up each game, and you know, we are seeing adjustments now after all of these games kind of accumulating to this point. But like you say, it's so fine margins with how things can turn out, and it is just picking those right moments with those right moves that you need. Like Jonathan needs to keep that tailwind. He's losing it too quickly in these games, and if he preserves it like he has done in previous games, then he can really capitalize on that. There he was fortunate enough that the chlorophyll kind of kicked in for him, and he was able to get the sleep powder, utilize that speed boost with the Venusaur. But if you're not able to utilize that in those situations, if you lose your Venusaur too quickly to the Charizard, if you don't protect it well enough from that, then things go quite quickly downhill from you.
Yeah, speed control and sleep control, I think, are definitely critical in this grand final. So let's jump into our next match and see who's going to be able to sort of nip out into the lead a little bit in this best of 5 set in the grand finals. We've got Venusaur and Charizard once again to Leonardo, so he's really sticking with this particular lead in this final set. Tornadus and Incineroar, however, being the options for Jonathan.
Yeah, and this is a nicer lead for Jonathan. You know, it does give him a few more options where you've potentially got a fake out into the Venusaur or the Charizard, and you've got that instant tailwind to take advantage of. And you've also got the option where if you want to with the Incineroar, you can go for a parting shot here and then pivot into something like the Kyogre that overwrites any switch to potentially Groudon from Leonardo's side of the field. The only problem that you have to worry about is maybe the Charizard going for the max airstream here into, you know, getting the Groudon onto the field for the Venusaur, maxing the Charizard, going for the airstream into the Incineroar. But the one thing that Jonathan can rely on, he's seen in previous games, if you've got that tailwind in effect, the Incineroar does outspeed the Charizard.
Yeah, the speed control is critical here, and Leonardo making an adjustment, bringing that Regieleki into play so that it can apply some electric type damage into the opposing Thundurus, and also maybe try and change the speed up a little bit with those Electro Webs that we saw towards the end of the previous game as well. But in contrast to the previous game, we're back to Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing our Pokemon very early on here in this grand finals, and Leonardo has opted to go for that with the Charizard once again. And like you said, Lee, lots of options here, particularly with that powerful max airstream down into the opposing Incineroar. But Tornadus has gone for the Tailwind, so Incineroar is going to have a little bit of speed behind it going into this next turn, and it goes for the Flare Blitz here. We haven't really seen the Incineroar go on the offensive as of yet. Straight into that Regieleki. Wow. Not enough to pick up a KO, however, but huge damage. And poor Regieleki, you know, coming in and taking a big hit in return. Tornadus is also going to have to take a powerful hit from that max airstream. And, you know, Charizard able to get the KO here, but I think you've got to be careful as well that the Tailwind is up on Jonathan's side of the field, and he now has a free switch into a Pokemon from the back.
Yeah, but the problem is the Regieleki getting that speed boost as well. We've seen how important that can be for Leonardo to take advantage and pressure things like the Tornadus and the Kyogre, which are both, you know, going to be able to outspeed. And you can't really bring in your Venusaur here because in front of the Charizard, I mean, you're going to be forced into that similar play where you kind of have to go for the max guard with Venusaur, then the parting shot into the Charizard. But the problem with that is now that well, the Incineroar, it's not a problem. Without the airstream, it would have been a problem because then your Incineroar would be moving before it, but now kind of falling a bit more into Jonathan's favour where the Incineroar will be the last thing to exit the field again after that airstream.
Yeah, that's the thing. The speed can be manipulated in so many different ways, whether it's through the tailwind or whether it's through these max airstreams. And I think you're quite right there, Lee. It was really critical of the Charizard to be able to get that boost up, because now no matter what Jonathan brings in, there's no sun on the field at the moment. So Venusaur's not going to get that boost. The Charizard and Regieleki are going to be primed to deal out some big damage.
Yeah, and you know, in a weather war, you never want to be the first player to bring your weather onto the field unless you're going to be able to really capitalize off it, because especially when you're down a Pokemon, because it really limits your options to be able to kind of switch out to get that weather back in. So, you know, Leonardo in a better position, in theory, where he's going to be able to change the weather up a bit easier than what Jonathan may be able to do after losing that Tornado staff this turn.
Yeah, you're right. As soon as you bring the weather into play, you've kind of thrown the challenge gauntlet down a little bit to have it overridden. So it's interesting, it hasn't come into play as of yet. Jonathan going for the max guard once again onto that Venusaur, as Regieleki goes for the Electro Web. Going to be able to connect onto that opposing Incineroar, obviously lower the speed and take it down to below 50% damage here. But I want to see what this Charizard is going to get up to. It goes for the max airstream, going to be able to connect onto that opposing Incineroar and remove it from play before Incineroar's able to go for any more damage with the Flare Blitz or even that parting shot that we've seen be so detrimental to the Charizard previously.
Yeah, really targeting into that one slot that you know is going to be the free one, because there's no protect there from Jonathan's side of the field, whereas you have seen the max guard countless times from the Venusaur already. So, you know, taking advantage of that. If the Kyogre maybe switched in there, then you just get a knockout, probably with the Electro Web combination with that airstream, and all the time you're putting yourself and your Regieleki into a great position, especially now that it is only the Kyogre and that Venusaur left on the field. Now the rain will come up for the Kyogre, but then you've got a really great switch into Groudon if you're Leonardo to go for the G-Max Blast Burn into the Venusaur. You've got the +2, so you don't really mind about the Chlorophyll ability activating on the Venusaur, and because it is in its Gigantamax form, you're not so worried about the potential Sleep Powder that came out in that previous set.
Yeah, that's very true. It's a really dominant start in this game coming out here from Leonardo. The Charizard really is in a great position. Even though the rain is on the field now with the Kyogre, like you said, you can just switch in the Groudon from the back, and then Charizard's in a great position to go for that powerful G-Max Wildfire and, you know, deal huge damage to the Venusaur. It means that you work around the Cobra Berry by not going for the max airstream, and then you can get that residual damage chipping away at the Kyogre as well.
Yeah, you could even choose the Kyogre this turn around, but it makes more sense to go after the Venusaur, I feel, because, you know, the Venusaur is the one thing on the field that can potentially boost the special attack power of the Kyogre, which makes it even more threatening, even in the sun. And the last turn max guarding, it's kind of an easy target now for Leonardo just to go after. It's a safe one, just get the G-Max Wildfire off onto it, remove it from the field, and then you've still got Regieleki in the back that you can bring in at a later point once that residual damage is taking a little effect on the Kyogre to kind of clean up the game.
Yep, Groudon's going to join the field and set the sun up. Kyogre just going to protect here, doesn't want to take any damage from this opposing Charizard. And Charizard, oh, it's actually the Venusaur moving first here with that max flare, targeting down into the opposing Charizard. But Charizard not going to mind taking these fire type attacks, is not very effective, does minimal damage. And in return, the Charizard is able to go for that max airstream and connect down onto the opposing Kyogre. I think something is interesting as well, if that had potentially been kind of the weather ball turning off in the rain, that could easily have been a max geyser, and that's something that the Charizard wouldn't have appreciated. So a great switch in there from Leonardo, bringing in the Groudon. Yeah,
just being aware that could have been a possibility, you know, just covering all bases here, just boosting the Charizard, making sure that you're weakening the Kyogre, and that's probably why we saw the target into the Kyogre there, because just in case we did see the Kyogre try to get an attack off, you're weakening it to the point where the Water Spout's not really going to be that significant going on to either the Charizard or the Groudon.
Groudon going on the defensive here, just protecting itself, particularly in the face of a Gigantamax Venusaur with access to G-Max Vine Lash. That's exactly what Jonathan has opted to go for into that slot. Still does a decent chunk through the protect, and of course the residual damage is going to be now here on the field, going down against Leonardo's side. Charizard is going to utilize that Blast Burn though, connects down onto the opposing Kyogre and is able to pick up the solid KO. Not something you see every day, a fire type move picking up big damage against the Kyogre, but you know, Charizard's got all the boosts it needs here with its ability, with its item, with the weather. It's sitting very, very happy on the field, and even though it now does have to take that turn to recharge after the Blast Burn, Leonardo has all the opportunities here to face down against Jonathan's lonely Venusaur on the field.
Yeah, but you know, the Venusaur's still in a good position now this next turn. Potentially going to be able to take an attack from the Groudon. You're going to be able to remove the Charizard from the field. You don't really fear the Regieleki too much. Now, you could take advantage of the position where you go after the Groudon here, because you know the recharge turn from the Charizard. But it looks like we are just going to see Jonathan forfeit that one. Not in a great position, one Pokemon against the entire team, pretty much, of Leonardo's side.
Yeah, Venusaur doesn't need to get KO'd. It can rest, get ready into the next game. It's been so many matches between these two players today. I think that was match 12, potentially, and we could be going into match 13 that they've had to play, and that's something that's really new for these players as well. When you are playing in such a tournament with double elimination, and then you have a bracket reset, and you've already faced each other previously, this is kind of uncharted territory for a lot of our players. Normally, you might face each other possibly in Swiss and then possibly in Top Cup, but not to the extent that these players have gone against. And I think you were kind of mentioning earlier, Lee, about the kind of mind games that are going through. These players have almost gone through all the utility options that they've got. We've seen lots of changes in leads. We've seen games play out very similarly. We've also seen games where just like one turn has been different. And this is now the point where it's like, if you're these players, what do you choose?
Yeah, and it's not just the mind games either, you know, the fatigue of the concentration that you're kind of putting into these games for this prolonged amount of time is really going to set in for both players, and this is what really sets aside the great players from the very good players, you know, and you know, it's always going to be a difficult situation, but like you say, the mind games are incredibly tough because we've seen most of the options, and we've seen most adjustments for different scenarios, so it's just down to the players maybe thinking, right, well, how can we know now that Leonardo is probably going to lead again with the Charizard Venusaur, so what is Jonathan's best way to deal with that? And I think, you know, it is very difficult because the flexibility that he's got there. Do you go with the Tornadus, get your Tailwind up, sacrifice your Tornadus, get a parting shot into the Charizard, or you know, it's so easy for that at that point as well for Leonardo to maybe switch in the Groudon, take advantage of the Venusaur Chlorophyll, put the Tornadus to sleep. There's so many variables there. I do feel like the Incineroar is quite key, but maybe it's time for potentially looking at the Torkoal to come back. Torkoal could come in and put that Charizard to sleep. It's not going to worry too much. You are boosting the solar power as well, but if you've got something like Incineroar where you can get maybe a parting shot out, preserve it, really disrupts the whole flow of using the Tornadus and Kyogre though. But I think you've got to look at other options, but you do have the Grimmsnarl there as well with that screen support, and that might be another option where he looks, you know, you're not boosting the solar power on the Charizard, but you're looking at your screens as a way of kind of giving you that additional protection, which is going to be so valuable against such big hitters on Leonardo's side of the field.
That's very true, and we've got game 4 to jump into now between Jonathan and Leonardo, and don't forget, Leonardo is potentially one game away from being your Players' Cup 3 champion, but Jonathan is going to do everything he can to try and stop that from happening. And speak of the Pokemon, Lee, we've got Grimmsnarl and Venusaur as the adaptation for Jonathan, facing down against the lead that Leonardo has stuck with, that Charizard and Venusaur.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a coincidence that this has happened when the Grimmsnarls come out here, but it does make sense, you know, it does with the screen support that Jonathan's got access to, it does give him that just little bit of security against something like these big attacks that we are seeing. You know, the Spirit Break as well that we know is on that Grimmsnarl, very useful in the same respect of how the Snarl from the Umbreon on Leonardo's side is very useful, you know, reducing that special attack damage. So furthering the defensive capabilities of your team, allowing you to take these big attacks turn after turn and get your strategy set up rather than kind of just getting knocked out after knockout after knockout.
Yeah, I mean, talking about strategy and big damage and knockouts, Charizard has certainly been a key Pokemon for Leonardo, and no surprise to see it Gigantamax up once again, particularly when you're facing down against that Venusaur. You want to maybe try and apply some pressure, and Jonathan once again going for the Gigantamax here on his side of the field, and I think it's great to see these players kind of bringing the same strategies, but I like seeing the adaptations that maybe can sway a game in their favour. Jonathan bringing in that Grimmsnarl, I want to see what it's going to be able to do to support this Venusaur a little bit further, maybe where Incineroar was falling short in these last couple of games. Grimmsnarl will be able to pick up the slack, and going for the light screen is certainly a great way to do this when you're in the face of two special attackers here, just going to boost up the special defense on Jonathan's side of the field. Charizard is going to go straight away for that G-Max Wildfire into the Venusaur, and you can see the light screen really paying off here. Venusaur going to be able to take that reasonably well. Residual damage, of course, coming into play, but Venusaur on Leonardo's side going to go for the Sleep Powder, and it misses. Venusaur on Jonathan's side able to go for that Max Ooze into the Charizard, doing a little bit of damage, but critically, of course, boosting up its own special attack. But the issue here is that Charizard was moving first.
Yeah, and that's the problem going into this next turn, especially with the residual damage from the G-Max Wildfire set up now from Leonardo's side of the field. And it's all well and good getting the light screen up, but the problem is it does leave Grimmsnarl a little bit of a city target for that sleep powder and for potentially a double up this next turn. Whereas, you know, the Venusaur is almost forced on Jonathan's side to go for the Max Guard. I mean, he could be quite bold in this position to go for another attack, but you aren't going to be knocking out the Charizard, and at best you're going to take the opposing Venusaur down to its sash, so you're not getting a massive return if you do risk the Venusaur here. So it's probably better in all accounts to try and preserve it a little bit here. Maybe you could go for a Spirit Break into the opposing Charizard, but it doesn't really improve your situation going into the following turn where you'd be more than likely in a similar situation again.
Yeah, and it certainly doesn't stop that Venusaur for going for more sleep powders in the future here. Grimmsnarl is going to go for that Sucker Punch though, get a little bit more damage onto that opposing Charizard, but Charizard going to go for that Max Airstream, targeting down into the Grimmsnarl. You know, it didn't manage to fall asleep in that previous turn, so it's going to have to take some more damage, particularly as it has Sucker Punch the Charizard. It's not very happy about that at all, and I think getting the speed boost up on Leonardo's side as well is something critical we've seen him do as a strategy in these past few games. Earth Power coming up from the Venusaur on Leonardo's side as well, connecting into Grimmsnarl, just going to do a little bit of damage. Venusaur, however, on Jonathan's side, the G-Max Vine Lash is going to go down into that Charizard, and although it's not dealing a huge amount of damage, that residual damage is now going to come into effect.
Yeah, and a really bold play here by Jonathan, you know, kind of from suspecting that from his previous plays that Leonardo might just go down into the safe target of Grimmsnarl here, thinking that potentially that G-Max, the Max Guard was going to come out here, but taking advantage of the room that was allowed him there and getting the G-Max Vine Lash off, which is so huge to just get that residual damage started on Leonardo's side of the field. And now, you know, Jonathan in a position where he can protect his Venusaur this last turn and let the Grimmsnarl go down, because it will go down to the G-Max Wildfire residual damage even if nothing targets into that slot, which might allow him to get another Sucker Punch off or a Spirit Break off into potentially something like the Venusaur here.
And Charizard's in a difficult situation because it doesn't want to take another Sucker Punch, but then if it goes for the Max Guard, it's going to get that residual damage as well coming through. And, you know, Leonardo might be tempted to bring in the Groudon, but then you get the Solar Powered chip as well. So a little bit tricky here for the Charizard. Jonathan going for the Max Guard on the Venusaur, and Venusaur on Leonardo's side going to have its Focus Sash broken as well. G-Max Wildfire not being able to find its mark thanks to the Max Guard, and Venusaur on Leonardo's side going straight away for that Earth Power. So Grimmsnarl has been removed from the field, but I think it's done good work, setting up that light screen, just protecting Jonathan's Pokemon a little bit more here.
Yeah, and detracting a little bit of attention, which give the room for the Venusaur to, you know, get that G-Max Vine Lash off, which was useful. And now, you know, you've still got the light screen in effect, which is going to be really useful, especially for your Tornadoes coming in. When it comes into this the same regard of that Blast Burn damage from the Charizard, because, you know, we have seen how powerful it is, how much damage it can do. But with the light screen kind of supporting Tornadoes, it feels like you could probably get a little bit more out of your turns and not go down so quickly, and making it a bit more difficult for Leonardo to kind of go for that option. The Venusaur is still a bit of a threat though from Leonardo's side of the field, because, you know, it has got the speed boost, it has got access to Sleep Powder, and it can really shut that Tornadoes down. So it's got to be something that Jonathan is aware of and tries to deal with as soon as possible, and getting max use out of these Tailwind turns is going to be crucial for him.
Yeah, even in the face of a Sleep Powder, getting that Tailwind up, allowing your Venusaur to be able to pick up the KO against the opposing Venusaur means you don't have to worry about any sleep here, so you get speed and sleep avoidance. Venusaur is going to fall down though to the Heat Wave coming out from the opposing Charizard, and does a little bit of damage to the opposing Tornadus, but Charizard, just able to hang on, but of course residual damage is going to be able to clean up that Charizard.
Yeah, and it does mean that both players are going to be down to their last two Pokemon here, and it's most likely on Leonardo's side going to be the Groudon and the Regieleki, and it's you know, we've seen this before from Jonathan where he sets up an endgame where he'll probably get his Rain, the Drizzle ability, overwritten by the Groudon because it's a slower Pokemon in this situation. But you've still got access to the Heat Wave from the Tornadus, and now with that light screen support, it makes taking attacks from that Regieleki a lot easier going into this next one.
I mean, this is where things get very, very intensely. Both our players are down to their last 2 remaining Pokemon, and Leonardo is 1 game away from being able to take the champion title. Jonathan, however, has got those 2 Pokemon that have been so great for him, being able to kind of counteract threats from Leonardo's side, particularly with the speed advantage that Jonathan has got thanks to that Tailwind. Regieleki is going to go for the Protect though, as Tornadus does go for the Heat Wave in the Sun. Of course, going to have that Fire move boosted up, and does manage to connect down onto the opposing Groudon. Does a decent chunk of damage, of course taking some recoil thanks to the Life Orb, and Kyogre able to go for that Water Spout with its full HP as well, that's able to utilize, making this very, very powerful. And even in the Sun, it finds its mark on the opposing Groudon, leaving just Regieleki to face down against these 2 remaining Pokemon for Jonathan. And as you mentioned, Lee, the Light Screen is still going to be in effect as well. The Grimmsnarl's carrying Light Clay, that gives extra longevity to those defensive supports.
Yeah, and it's all well and good that you have Electro Web on the Regieleki, but you might be able to take the Tornadus down with that Magnet Boost, but you're not going to be taking the Kyogre down. And with the residual damage now in effect as well, kind of chipping away, and with something like Water Spout or Origin Pulse coming out, it's just going to be too much for the Regieleki to deal with. And you can see there that the Heat Wave is just enough. And Jonathan tying this set back up, you know, in phenomenal fashion.
I mean, this is what we love to see. This is how we want it to go down. We have gone through Players' Cup, and there have been so many competitors. We've gone through region finals, global finals. We're now here in the grand finals, and there is 1 game separating our champion from our runner-up. And it's just amazing that these 2 players have faced each other for so long in today's tournament, and it now just comes down to 1 game apiece. Whoever wins the next one is going to be our champion.
I know, and it couldn't have really been written better. We're getting all of the action today. It's great seeing such a great match to kind of finish this tournament off, you know, and really coming right down to the final game of the tournament to decide it. And yeah, it's really difficult from both sides of the field, you know. I love the adjustment there from Jonathan to bring the Grimmsnarl. It really made a lot of difference in that game, and you know, carried through the fact that the Venusaur was able to kind of get a lot more utility out of its turns than it has done previously. It gave room to the Tornadus to come in to get that end position set up with the Tornadus and the Kyogre, and then really take advantage of even if the Groudon comes in with the Heat Wave to deal with the Regieleki. And you know, the Light Screen was still in effect like we saw, which would have made it difficult even if a Heat Wave missed in that situation. But yeah, I think Leonardo needs to maybe rethink how he's approaching the match going into this one. You know, you want to really... He missed opportunities there where, you know, he was predicting the max guard onto the Venusaur, which was very likely, and you can see the logic behind that because the Venusaur on Jonathan's side's done that so many times before. And then, but choosing the Grimmsnarl, that's not as much of an offensive threat, you know, and then that allowed Jonathan to get the G-Max Vine Lash off. Whereas if you'd attacked into that turn, then you would have got rid of it. You wouldn't have been dealing with that going into the subsequent turns, which did kind of just stack up a little bit too much for him in the end.
Yeah, I mean, all 4 of us commentators have been able to analyse this matchup between these 2 players at some point today. And Lee, I think the last thing to do is jump into the very final game of this Pokemon Players Cup 3 tournament. Let's find out who our VGC champion is going to be between Jonathan and Leonardo. Leonardo is going to lead out strongly once again with Venusaur and Charizard. This is his tried and tested lead. Jonathan has not brought out the Grimmsnarl, instead Incineroar and the Tornadus.
Yeah, so reverting back to a lead that he's kind of used already in this set that maybe didn't work out too well from last time, but still got options here. It's whether or not you allow the Tornadus to kind of go down for free or not, because, you know, the one thing that you can do here is utilize the Fake Out on the Incineroar if you do... if you are scared of the Venusaur going for the Sleep Powder, it's very difficult. It's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to get the Tailwind up, or do you want to preserve the Tornadus for the next turn and then utilize that parting shot onto the Charizard, which is always a good option to reduce the power there?
Yeah, certainly the question of the day. Which option do you want to go down? Whether it's your Incineroar, your Venusaur, your Charizard, what's going to be the pick? And Leonardo is going to jump out into this last match with the Gigantamax Charizard once again, able to apply good pressure to both the Thundurus and the Tornadus. I keep saying Thundurus for some reason in this match, and the Incineroar as well. And we know that it can pick up a really big KO against that Incineroar with the Max Airstream. But Tornadus is going to have something to say about it first of all, going for that Tailwind and boosting up the speed on Jonathan's side of the field. Parting shot, Jonathan going back to that tried and tested strategy that worked so well for him, able to catch the parting shot onto that opposing Charizard, bringing its special attack down by 1 stage.
Yeah, but the one drawback about this play is it's all well and good getting that stat drop onto the Charizard on the special attack and its attack, but the problem is with the Tailwind going up, the Incineroar is in an unfamiliar situation where it's going to be going out before the attack goes off. Normally, Incineroar will go out last, allowing whatever comes in to get in undamaged, but in this situation you're having to switch something in here where it could potentially take a lot of damage and put him at a little bit of a disadvantage. But then again, if Leonardo decides to go after the Tornadus again, it's a free switch in.
It's exactly what Leonardo's decided to do, going for that max airstream down into the opposing Tornadus. Of course, Venusaur coming in, it could have taken the damage from that, but it is sort of running that Cobra Berry, could have survived out the turn there, and then maybe giving Jonathan a few utility options. But now he's got that Venusaur out on the field. I wonder if Jonathan's going to make a switch.
Yeah, and the one plus about that play obviously was it meant that the Tornadus was able to survive that turn from the Charizard, where before it has went down, which means he can preserve that Tailwind for later on, which is so imperative for him executing his game plan. Makes it a little bit more difficult for Leonardo to kind of deal with it in the late game. Has to keep in mind that is there. But again, getting the Airstream onto the Regieleki puts him in a nice spot where he doesn't have to worry too much about a potential Tailwind right now, because the Regieleki is so far out in front because of just how ridiculously fast it is.
Yeah, and Incineroar joining the field here, you know, it can come back in a little bit safer. It doesn't mind taking the Wildfire, for example, and we now know that any Airstream coming in its way, it's going to be able to survive thanks to the drop that Parting Shot gave that Charizard. But Jonathan, to no surprise, is Gigantamaxing up the Venusaur here. Again, going to be able to apply some good pressure with that residual damage with the Vine Lash, and Regieleki isn't going to want to take one of those at all. And Regieleki not protecting, going for Electro Repair, really trying to play the speed games here on this Game 5, and lowering the speed of both the Incineroar and the Venusaur as well. And those, of course, will stay in effect even when Tailwind is over. G-Max Wildfire going to connect down into that Venusaur, able to survive thanks to the drop, but still does such a significant amount of damage, and that could come in critical a little bit later on, particularly with those residual effects coming into play. Venusaur, however, of course, going to retaliate with some residual effects of its very own with that G-Max Vine Lash, and poor Regieleki is going to have to take the full brunt of that attack and be KO'd straight away by it.
Yeah, and it's a nice turn here for Jonathan to get rid of that Regieleki now, because it gives you so much more protection later on in this game when that Tornadus that we know is in the back and the potential Kyogre that can come in and not have to worry about that threatening electric type that Leonardo's utilized so well throughout these games. Now the problem is, do you bring in the Groudon here? Probably not, because you bring in the Groudon, you're giving the Venusaur an extra turn because the Chlorophyll is going to activate the Tailwind in effect, and even though you've got the Airstream on the Charizard right now, you're still going to be outsped and put your Groudon in a bit of an awkward position. But you know, you've still got the Incineroar to utilize potentially Fake Out into the Groudon slot, or try for another Parting Shot into the Charizard here, because that would be so beneficial going forward in this match for Jonathan. If he can get another Parting Shot off, you know, he's got the Tailwind up, he doesn't need to worry about Parting Shot. He can go for the Max Guard play like he likes to do, like we've seen him do, and just reduce the power of that Charizard a little bit more, and potentially, you know, prevent any more speed boosts coming out, because the Charizard could opt for a max airstream into, you know, the Venusaur slot. It's more likely that you go after the Incineroar slot here, but I mean, the reducing of the power for the Charizard is probably a bit more beneficial at this stage of the game.
Yeah, no, you're right here. It's about the moves and the counter moves in this game. Jonathan needs to do what he needs in order to be able to win out that aim game. And whether it's playing defensively for now, trying to get that critical Parting Shot down so the Charizard's not a threat later on, could be the strategy to go for here. But Leonardo just going to make a switch, and no Max Guard. Instead, it's going to be the Max Flare catching the Venusaur on the switch in. Amazing dramatic play there from Jonathan, bringing it right down to its focus sash. Charizard is going to retaliate with that Max Airstream, however, so constantly boosting up the speed, and Incineroar unfortunately not going to be able to survive that attack. So although Venusaur does come in for Leonardo here and does take a huge amount of damage, it does get that speed boost up, and depending if there's any kind of protective play that Leonardo can do here, might be able to try and stall out those Tailwind turns. But we know that the Venusaur on Leonardo's side does not carry Protect.
No, and that's going to be a really easy target from this next turn, especially, you know, if you do decide to bring in something like the Kyogre here, dictate the weather. You've always, by doing that though, you've always got to worry about the Groudon coming in from Leonardo's side, but you know, it's going to take so much damage in the process here. But the fact that, you know, Jonathan's still got Tailwind in effect puts him in a little bit more of an advantage situation than he would be without that. Do you bring in Tornadus here? Potentially, but you know, it's probably better to kind of preserve the Tornadus. And I mean, you could even bring in the Kyogre here, and just go for just a double protect to preserve the tailwind ending, not take advantage of it, to get the Tornadus in for free. But we are seeing the Tornadus hit the field for Jonathan.
Yeah, Tornadus here on the action as the Gigantamax turns end for the Charizard on Leonardo's side. Venusaur, of course, still has got a move to make here, and this is where things can get interesting for Jonathan.
Yeah, and with the the Sun up on the field, the Venusaur is going to be outspeeding everything. So it's got kind of the pick. Do you go after the Charizard or do you go after the Venusaur? Like you've mentioned, Lou, the Venusaur we know doesn't have a Protect, so it's an easy target here. And then do you just go for the Protect of your own on your Tornadus to kind of wait out these Tailwind turns so you can set it up the next turn and get your Kyogre in a phenomenal spot against the Groudon and the Charizard left? Because you've already seen, even if the Sun does end up going up, you've seen the damage that the Kyogre can do, and at the same time the Tornadus can take advantage of the Sun. We've already seen with those Heat Waves, which makes it very difficult to kind of get around that combination.
Oh, it's coming down to the last second here. Can Jonathan lock it in time? I'm not too sure. It went right down to 0 there. Oh, not going to see any switches as Venusaur does go for the Weather Ball. However, in the Sun, going to be targeting down into that 5-type move into the opposing Tornadus and picking up the solid KO there against Tornadus. Venusaur, however, going to go for the G-Max Vine Lash down into the Venusaur. Like you said, Lee, very easy target. We know it's not able to protect, and even if it's switched, then again, a free target for that Venusaur to aim its vines into. Charizard, however, going to be able to pick up a KO with the Heat Wave that's able to connect, and in such a dramatic turn of events, Jonathan is down to just one remaining Pokemon.
Yeah, but it is that Kyogre, and if you're going to have one Pokemon left in your arsenal, then it's going to be the Kyogre. You're going to pick that one to come in against the Charizard and the Groudon here that we know that Leonardo's got. The one thing that you would say that kind of falls in favor for Jonathan is that he was so late in setting up those G-Max Vine Lashes that's going to be enough. If you can protect just even one turn, 2 turns, that Charizard is going to be taken down. And you've got to consider that maybe the solar power plus the residual damage is probably enough to get the Charizard here. We do see the rain come out from the Kyogre, but we know it's going to be overwritten by the Slog Groudon on Leonardo's side of the field.
Yeah, that's the thing. In the Weather Wars, something we've kind of talked about consistently throughout this tournament, it looks like the victor to, I think, nobody's surprise is going to be Sun. That's what we're going to end out Players' Cup on, with the Sun being in the sky. But whether or not this Kyogre has a way to be able to pick up KOs against these Pokemon are yet to be told. Tailwind has, of course, ended. And if you're Jonathan, you might want to go for this Protect on the Kyogre, as he is doing, to just try and get that additional residual damage onto both the Charizard and the opposing Groudon as well. Because if you are going to be going for those water... I was going to say, if you're going for those water-type moves, you need them to be able to pick up a KO, but Groudon has got something to say about it, going for that Swords Dance, because Leonardo wants to be able to try and take this Kyogre down in the next turn, and wants to be able to connect one move from that Groudon and just pick up the match. I mean, Charizard's gone down now. It's Groudon versus Kyogre, Lee.
Yeah, this comes down to it. The battle of these restricteds is here, but I think Leonardo doing everything right here, taking the opportunity to know that the Kyogre is probably likely to protect there, so really maximizing what he's getting out of this turn and putting himself in a position where the Precipice Blades, if it hits, is guaranteed to knock out the Kyogre. It's all about this Groudon surviving, which it can't.
Goodness!
It can't survive. A single Toggle Water Spout in the Sun. Groudon going down, unfortunately, and Kyogre victorious, Lou.
That is phenomenal from the Kyogre, meaning that Jonathan Evans is your Pokemon Players' Cup 3 champion. Huge congratulations there to Jonathan, and well done to Kyogre as well. Got to give big credits to that amazing pick from Jonathan. Phenomenal. I am shaking at the end of that. Amazing. Well done to Jonathan. Well done to Leonardo. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, massive congratulations to both Leonardo and